Lamor Whitehead, convicted today on charges he defrauded a parishioner when she gave him $90,000 from her savings. The case also involved claims he tried to get a $500,000 loan in return for access to Mayor Adams.
What happens when a man preaching hope and prosperity is hiding a life built on secrets? Lamor Whitehead, the flashy bishop known for designer suits, luxury cars, and bold sermons, gained attention as a powerful religious figure. But behind the image was a darker story filled with criminal convictions, fraud allegations, lawsuits, and betrayal. His rise raises serious questions about trust, wealth, and faith. How did a man of God become tied to so many scandals? And what happens when followers discover the truth? This is the story of Lamor Whitehead's controversial life. Rise of a flashy bishop. Lamor Whitehead built a public image that was impossible to ignore. With custom designer suits, diamond jewelry, and luxury cars like Rolls-Royces, he presented himself as more than a pastor. He became a symbol of success, confidence, and prosperity. To his followers, he was not just preaching about blessings, he looked like he was living proof of them. His sermons reached far beyond the walls of his Brooklyn church. Through social media, especially Instagram, Whitehead displayed a lifestyle filled with wealth and status. Expensive clothes, flashy accessories, and luxury vehicles became part of his brand. For many people watching from struggling communities, his image was powerful. He seemed to represent the idea that faith could lead not only to spiritual peace, but also to financial success. That message made him appealing. Whitehead spoke about rising from hardship, finding purpose, and walking in divine favor. His confidence was hard to miss. He often spoke as if he were chosen for something greater, positioning himself as a bold spiritual leader with business success to match. To loyal supporters, he was inspiring. He appeared to be someone who had overcome adversity and now wanted others to do the same. But the more his image grew, the more questions followed. His luxury lifestyle stood in sharp contrast to the struggles faced by many of the people he preached to. While some saw his wealth as a sign of God's blessing, others wondered where the money really came from. When a religious leader makes prosperity part of the message, the source of that prosperity becomes impossible to ignore. Whitehead would kind of show off his wealth during church services, gold chains draped around him, diamond pieces flashing, and these very tailored outfits while he was delivering sermons about success and faith. He always connected those visuals with the message, so it worked in a way. But it also made critics give him a little side eye. To some people, it didn't read like ministry at all, more like a staged performance. They said he was using faith, hope, and folks' desire for a better life to build up his own image. Like that part wasn't sincere. Over time, he got that nickname Bling Bishop, which kind of sums up the whole thing. It pointed to how his ministry mixed religion and spectacle, sort of in one breath. Some admired his boldness and thought nothing bad should come from a pastor talking about success. But others kept asking if a man who was so centered on luxury could still truly lead with humility and real seriousness, you know? That conflict stayed right in the middle of Whitehead's story. There was the confident bishop preaching hope, prosperity, and redemption. And then there was this other picture, rumors swirling around him, financial questions that wouldn't quit, and legal trouble following. People got pulled in by his charm and charisma, yet his earlier history suggested a much more complicated reality underneath all that brightness. And honestly, the flashy image wasn't just decoration, it became part of the puzzle. Was Lamor Whitehead actually a man blessed by faith, or was his whole public persona designed to hide messy dealings? His rise as this flashy bishop set things up for a story where ambition, religion, wealth, and suspicion crash into each other for good. Behind the designer suits, the luxury cars, and the polished sermons was a history shaped by hardship, tough choices, and controversy. What seemed like divine favor at first would soon start showing something else, something far more troubling underneath. To understand the man behind the bling, we must look back to where it all started. A story marked by loss, determination, and the early signs of a complicated destiny. Lamor Whitehead's hidden past. Lamor Whitehead's story began in Brooklyn in 1978, but tragedy shaped his life almost immediately. Just 6 weeks after his birth, his father was slain in a violent police incident, leaving Lamor to be raised by his mother alongside his siblings. Despite that early loss, he excelled in school and became a talented athlete, giving him a path toward a promising future. After high school, he received several scholarship offers and later attended Eastern New Mexico University, where he studied accounting and videography. When he returned to New York, he entered the financial world by starting a mortgage brokerage business. Around the same time, Lamor claimed to experience a spiritual awakening. He pursued ministry education, became a licensed New York State chaplain, and was certified to officiate marriages and funerals. On the surface, he appeared to be building a life of service, faith, and redemption. Still, there's this undeniable contrast between what the story says about redemption and what darker deeds came out later. While he kept working as a mortgage broker, Lamor was, kind of steadily, building connections and getting access to personal financial details that people didn't really expect to be used against them. At first, it looked like an above-board operation, but it soon got tangled up in schemes that involved deception and identity theft. And his background in finance, plus that ministry education, sort of made this weird, if troubling, meeting place between trust and opportunity. If you understand that earlier life context, it helps you see why some people were drawn in by Lamor in the first place, and also why their vulnerabilities were so easy to exploit. His real strengths weren't just preaching. It was more like he could read people and situations, then later on use that insight to push things in a direction he wanted. What looked, from the outside, like a person lifting himself above tragedy was partly a carefully made mask. Under the polish of ministry and business, the groundwork for future fraud and all those legal fights was being laid pretty quietly. That combination, education, community standing, and a past that stayed messy, made him into this paradoxical figure, someone who could speak about hope while taking advantage of hope itself. His early years set the stage for the later crash between faith and fraud. And the details of what comes next will make it clearer how a man who was once admired started to unravel. He left victims behind, and also a lot of lingering questions about integrity and about whether redemption is real or just performed. His formative years give you a view of his ambitions, sure, but also the pressure and the circumstances that may have shaped his decisions. But the turning point showed up when those decisions betrayed trust. And once he crossed legal lines, it was basically a fall from grace that few people could have imagined. The identity theft that exposed Lamor. Lamor Whitehead's first major criminal scandal involved a string of identity thefts connected to luxury vehicle purchases. Around 2004, authorities in Suffolk County, New York, began receiving reports from residents whose personal information had been stolen and used to finance expensive vehicles, including Range Rovers and motorcycles. Investigators eventually identified Lamor as the central figure behind the scheme. A key part of the operation involved a woman who worked at a Long Island car dealership. Because of her job, she had access to customer credit reports, social security numbers, and bank details. Lamor reportedly used her logged-in credentials to steal that information and apply for loans in other people's names. While he appeared to be charming her with gifts and attention, he was secretly using that access to fund a flashy lifestyle. At the same time, Lamor was working as a mortgage broker, giving him even more access to private financial information. This made the crimes even more damaging. He allegedly approached clients with investment offers, asking them to borrow money against their homes. One client trusted him enough to loan $200,000, expecting a return of $225,000 within 30 days, but the repayment never came. By 2006, the scheme began to collapse. Lamor was arrested in Manhattan while driving a stolen Land Rover. At just 27 years old, he was reportedly wearing a red and white mink coat, a symbol of the flashy image he had built through crime. Police also found stolen laptops, cell phones, a stolen firearm, and a bulletproof vest. Although he was initially released on bail, the case continued to grow. Investigators linked him to more than $500,000 in stolen loans, while prosecutors believed the total fraud may have exceeded $2 million. In 2008, Lamor was convicted on 17 counts of identity theft and sentenced to 10 to 30 years in prison. Still, he served less than 6 years before being released as a model inmate. The conviction marked a dramatic fall for a man who would later present himself as a spiritual leader. But it also revealed a pattern that would follow him for years: charm, trust, money, and deception woven tightly together. This identity theft scandal exposed the darker side of Lamor Whitehead. It showed how his ability to persuade people could be used not just from the pulpit, but also to manipulate and defraud. The opulent image Lamor Whitehead projects is deeply rooted in a history many would never guess at first glance. As his story unfolds, the layers of wealth, faith, and deception become inseparable, pulling into focus the sharp divide between the pulpit and the courtroom. Post-prison ministry and prosperity gospel. After serving less than 6 years in prison, Lamor Whitehead returned to public life with a new mission. He founded the Leaders of Tomorrow Ministries, beginning with a small congregation of just 43 people gathering in his home. From the start, his message was clear. Faith was not only about spiritual strength, but also financial success. Whitehead's preaching leaned heavily into the prosperity gospel, the belief that wealth, success, and material blessings can reflect divine favor. Instead of focusing only on humility or sacrifice, he told believers they should expect abundance. For people struggling financially, that message was powerful. It offered hope that faith could change their circumstances. But Whitehead did not just preach prosperity, he displayed it. At services, he wore designer suits, diamond chains, expensive watches, and arrived in luxury cars. His lifestyle became part of the sermon. He presented himself as proof of the blessings he promised others could receive. This image helped attract attention and followers. Whitehead encouraged members to give money as a seed of faith, suggesting that what they gave would return in greater blessings. During services, he reportedly held up empty envelopes and invited people to give, whether small amounts or thousands. For some, this message was inspiring. It spoke to people desperate for a way out of poverty, disappointment, and struggle. But it also raised concerns. His wealth, charm, and expensive image made critics question whether his ministry was truly about faith or about using hope as a way to gain money and trust. But it also raised some serious concerns. Critics asked how a small young ministry could support such an expensive lifestyle. Designer clothes, luxury cars, jewelry, and all those public displays of wealth felt hard to connect through church donations alone. And then his past criminal conviction showed up, and it made those questions even harder to ignore, honestly. On top of that, Whitehead expanded his influence online. Through social media, he kept showing off his suits, cars, jewelry, and his confident preaching style. Supporters saw a man who had overcome hardship. Critics saw something more carefully assembled, like the image was built to earn admiration, pull in donations, and win trust. As the ministry grew, troubling stories began to surface. Some people claimed they were financially manipulated or misled. Those accusations hinted that the same charm he used in the pulpit might also have been used to get access to people's money and their confidence. So the whole thing became complicated. To some, he was a bold preacher offering hope. To others, he was using faith as a shield for greed and deception. Behind the sermons about blessings and divine favor, questions about money, trust, and exploitation kept building, step by step. This tension between faith and suspicion would soon deepen as further allegations and legal battles came to light. Lawsuits and allegations. After release. After Lamor Whitehead's release from prison, the polished image around his ministry began to crack. Behind the sermons about faith, success, and redemption, lawsuits and accusations started following him. One of the most serious cases involved Pauline Anderson, a former church member who trusted him with her life savings. Pauline had recently undergone major surgery and wanted to buy a home, despite having poor credit. Whitehead allegedly promised that his company could help her purchase a house, handle repairs, and return any remaining money with interest. Trusting his words, Pauline gave him a $90,000 check, her entire savings and retirement fund. But the home never came. Pauline also never received the monthly payments Whitehead allegedly promised during the process. When she tried contacting him, she was met with excuses. He claimed he was busy, including with his campaign for Brooklyn Borough President. By mid-2021, Pauline and her family began to realize the deal might never happen. Her son, Rashid, became especially outspoken. At first, he had supported his mother's decision, but when the money disappeared and no house was purchased, he demanded answers. The situation grew worse after Rashid received an email from Whitehead that appeared to be mistakenly sent to him. The message discussed a down payment on a multi-million-dollar property in Saddle River, raising even more questions about why Pauline had not been repaid. When confronted, Whitehead allegedly responded with spiritual warnings and dismissed the money as a donation unless there was a contract. That answer only deepened suspicion. Eventually, Pauline's case became part of a federal lawsuit accusing Whitehead of defrauding her of her life savings. But Pauline's story was not the only allegation. Other claims accused Whitehead of using intimidation to pressure a businessman into paying $5,000 and trying to secure a $500,000 loan in exchange for real estate stakes. Whitehead denied the claims, saying his accusers were opportunists using his public name for attention. Court records and other lawsuits kind of painted a worrying picture. Around the time of his publicized 2022 robbery, reporters turned up more financial problems again and again. His big mansion reportedly got an eviction notice, and he also had hundreds of thousands in court judgments linked to unpaid debts, bounced checks, real estate fights, and defaulted car payments. Even with the accusations piling up, Whitehead kept showing up like he was the one who got hurt. He and his lawyers said he would take on the claims. He also insisted he was being unfairly targeted by the media and by the accusers, which is the version he stuck to. Still, for the followers who once bought into his message of prosperity, the lawsuits forced painful questions like, what about trust, faith, and betrayal? In that way, Whitehead's post-prison life started to look less like redemption and more like this slow-growing courtroom drama. As the dust settles on these allegations, the fate of many hangs in the balance, caught between belief and bitter disillusionment. The 2022 robbery and public fallout. On July 24, 2022, Lamor Whitehead's public image took another dramatic hit during a live-streamed Sunday sermon at his Brooklyn church. Dressed in a maroon velvet robe, gold cuffs, rings, and a thick chain, Whitehead was preaching when three armed men suddenly stormed the service. Congregants dropped to the floor in fear as the robbers demanded valuables. The attack was terrifying and highly public. Whitehead's wife, who was holding their young child, had jewelry taken from her. One gunman reportedly held a weapon to Whitehead's head while removing his bishop's ring, wedding band, and diamond chains. The men escaped in a white Mercedes, while the live stream footage quickly spread online. The robbery made Whitehead even more famous, but not always in his favor or something like that. A lot of people started questioning if it was real, with some folks speculating the whole incident had been staged for attention, or maybe even for insurance money. His repeated sermon reenactments, plus those warnings that pastors should keep themselves armed, only fueled more suspicion, you know. Authorities later confirmed the robbery was genuine, and 2 suspects were arrested. Still, it put Whitehead's lifestyle under a harsher spotlight. His luxury cars, designer clothing, and pricey jewelry didn't really match his role as a spiritual leader in a struggling community. That contrast brought up questions about wealth, faith, and trust. The trouble didn't end there either. Whitehead soon filed multi-million-dollar lawsuits against critics who accused him of involvement in the robbery. Then, during a September sermon, he was seen grabbing a woman who disrupted the service and pushing her off camera. Police arrived, and while Whitehead was briefly handcuffed, the woman was the one who got charged. Taken together, these things made the controversy around him sink deeper. Whitehead framed himself as a targeted preacher and a survivor, but the public seemed to see something more layered. A man stuck between ministry, fame, luxury, and legal trouble. Lamor Whitehead's story is a tangled web of faith, fortune, and fraud that challenges the boundaries between redemption and deceit. From a flashy bishop inspiring many to a man facing serious legal battles, his life reminds us to look beyond appearances. If you found this story intriguing, please like the video and subscribe for more deep dives into the complicated lives behind the headlines. And before you go, watch the next video shown on the screen, where another shocking public figure's carefully built image begins to crack.